I'm Stuart and I'm here with Jonathan Tremaine and Jay Thomas. And we're talking about this upcoming event that we have in 2012, in March 1, 2, and 3, called the Stand Gathering. And, you know, one of the things that we're doing is we're talking about the call of God upon the black community. I mean, as we know, God is raising up a prayer movement that is so obvious. I mean, within America, I mean, there's prayer meetings, I mean, popping up everywhere, from small ones to big ones to stadiums. We just spent time in Detroit, you know, together, 24 hours, you know, thousands of people there and so forth. And but one of the things the Lord is saying, He's talking about the prophetic destiny on the black community to lead in the place of worship. And then most of you come, you know, from that background, and you yourself are a worship leader. And so Jay, just talk to us about the issue of worship, because we're talking specifically about intimacy-fueled worship more than just anointed worship, and there's a big difference.
Absolutely.
And you have a lot of energy about that. So break that down a little. What's the difference between anointed worship or anointed worship experience versus intimacy-fueled worship?
Absolutely. Having grown up in a setting where I was accustomed to gospel music and singing gospel music and being in settings where there was lots of gospel music being sung, I experienced the soul side of worship, being the emotional side. Worship tends to be in the black community traditionally, historically even, has been a lot of emotion, a lot of hype, and a lot of experience, but lacking that thing that gives the grace and the sustaining power to live out a life of holiness Monday through Saturday. So it's been watered down to nothing but a Sunday morning experience. But I think about my ancestors and even those who were in slavery, and the thing that actually gave them the strength to endure the thing that they went through was actually intimacy. There was the talking and dialoguing with the one to whom they sang.
So we had it in our past. In the past, we had the intimacy very strongly.
Absolutely.
But we've kind of lost it along the way.
Somewhere along the way, and this is not across the board, but somewhere along the way, we lost that place of intimacy, that thing that actually fueled us to continue to go further, and it became more about the music and less about the person. And even the message of the music actually became more about singing about a man to people versus singing to the man himself. And so as a worship leader, I think we have to get back to that place as a race of people, as a culture of people. We have to get back to that place of actual encounter with the man himself. That's the thing that's going to fuel us to actually walk out holiness and righteousness and not tolerate some of the things that we see.
So talk a little bit about how does what happens in the privacy of your own heart and your fellowshipping and your dialogue and your interactions with Jesus, how does that affect what you do when you actually lead worship sets?
You know, I often say when I travel and I have the opportunity to speak to people, the Lord spoke to me several years ago, and He said two things. Number one, He said, you cannot do publicly what you do not do privately. Well, that's the first thing He said. And then the second thing He said, stop looking for a platform. I'll give you a platform when you've got something to say. Wow. And I said, and so from that I understood from the Lord that obviously it's not about platform ministry, but in order to even be effective, and effective is a relative term in this context, but in order to be effective, and I'm saying effective in the heart of God, not in the eyes of men, but effective in the heart of God, it's required that we actually spend time with the Lord in our personal place, in the secret place when nobody's looking. That's really where worship happens. Worship doesn't happen on stage. Worship doesn't happen with a crowd.
Yeah, this is so appropriate because you lead the thing called the Heart of David, which actually focuses on the creative expression of the prophetic message, but including worship. And this is the story of David. David had private victories before he had a public victory. He had to kill the lion and the bear in private before he killed the giant in public. Absolutely. I mean that's what the Lord was giving you a Davidic mandate in a lot of ways. But Jonathan, talk to us about this whole issue, because the reason why we're talking about this issue of being anointed versus intimacy and based worship is because there are so many gifted singers and musicians within the black community. The stamp of God is so clear, and yet there's so much confusion.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about what begins in private, then going public. And when you look at the history of the worship expression in the black community, it began in the private place of prayer. It began in that place of encounter. Our ancestors crying out to God and then setting it to song, prayers and song. And so we came out of slavery with a great possession as a worshiping people. But I think what happened is once we tasted freedom, we began to sing about our freedoms and began to exalt our freedoms above the reality of the one who brought us out. And so then worship began in our culture to take on many different forms, not just through song. We began to commercialize and package and distribute, our giftings in such a way that we began to not only sell out and create record labels, and certain record labels that begin to glorify what should have happened in a marriage bed or in a marriage covenant, begin to take that public, and we begin to sing about the eros type of intimacy rather than the agape. And then not only that, but worship began to manifest in the form of our other talents, athletically and our entertainment abilities. And so we become a culture that really celebrates our ability to get man's attention, then celebrating and really honoring in our heart the ability to have God's attention.
Good.
Yeah, so the real issue is that we've got to call, a whole generation of black young adults, male and female, to get locked into the beauty of Jesus.
Absolutely.
Now, you've even said in other segments that the wondrous things that are found in God's Word. There's nothing like feeling the power of God's love on the inside, and that energizing your song, energizing the rhythms on the drums, on the bass, the keyboards, whatever, and it would just change so many things in our day and in our time. And so, but gentlemen, thank you for your time, and this has been great.